Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. Give us just a few minutes and we'll let some more folks trickle into the room before we get started. All right, I think it's about time. Let's just get started. We've got a lot of content today. I'm really excited. Let me turn on my camera, say hello. Welcome back, everybody, to the When Things Go Wrong webinar series presented by the GMP Collective. I'm super excited to see you all here today. My name is David Vaillencourt. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and CEO of the GMP Collective. I also wear a few other hats around the cannabis industry. I'm the vice chair of Cannabis Committee D37, ASTM International's Committee D37 on Cannabis Standardization. And one thing that I really love to do, which is why I'm here running this company, organizing these webinars, is ensuring that we have safe, quality access to cannabis medicine. I've applied my Master's of Science in the area of lab testing and quality assurance plans for major government projects, QA/QC work, quality assurance plans, DOD, DOI, all sorts of fun acronyms in my previous to cannabis world. And then thanks to my curiosity, found myself in cannabis in 2018. I'm a lifelong learner, and thanks to my curiosity and watching things click in people's brains, what I found I really enjoy doing is helping folks understand why things matter and why you do what you do. So that really brings us to this webinar series that we've put together. And with that, today's topic that I want to jump into is about sustainability and data optimization. And sustainability, even though my master's was actually in environmental science, it still just has this connotation. And I think folks don't really understand how that ties to profitability and running a successful business. And we're really going to dive into those topics today. Things like understanding what key performance indicators you can establish before you even begin the design of your operation, and what to do with those KPIs. And really, in fashion of when things go wrong, understanding and talking about some of the most common pitfalls that new business owners, especially here in the cannabis industry, make during planning and how to avoid them. And so with that, before we jump in and introduce our speakers today, I want to put a brief poll out just to see who's in the room. So go ahead and complete your poll, fill out the poll. We'll have about 30, 40 seconds. It's a tough one, one answer, single choice. All right, about 5 more seconds. If you haven't participated yet, get your answers in. I will pause there, going once, going twice, and sold. So we've got a good amount of ancillary operators or ancillary business folks. We've got a distributor, an extractor processor, and a cultivator. So fantastic. And I also recognize that sometimes in several states, we've got vertical operations. So depending on where you are, you may wear multiple hats. So thanks for flipping the right coin and choosing what you chose. All right, so will the real Alexa please stand up? We've got a few here. I know she's got a fan club. Good to see you, Alexa.
Thank you, David.
Really excited to have you on today. You've got just a brief a bit about you. From what I've gotten to know, you've got about 20 years more of experience working in a variety of industries, especially in the restaurant and kitchen supply space, with a focus on design, build, project management, and supply chain management. I know you currently manage the design and build practice for Omega Equipment and Supply, a cannabis-based subsidiary of the Wasserstrom Company, one of the country's oldest and longest running kitchen supply companies, restaurants, supply chain providers for the restaurant and hospitality industries. So stoked to have you coming in from just outside of Phoenix today, right?
Yes, David. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And to round out our panel, I'm excited to have Shawn Cooney join us. Shawn is a serial entrepreneur, tech savvy with the vision and ability to get products out in front of the market. I've known Shawn for several years now. He founded Cloud Farming, which worked with the Boston Redevelopment Authority to help rezone all of Boston's neighborhoods for farm use. He's also the co-founder of the Sustainable Cannabis Coalition, which gathers industry leaders to create change in the functioning of cannabis industry's sustainability profile. Maybe no coincidence why we've got him on today's topic and webinar today. He's also the vice chair of the NCIA Facility Design Committee, where he and I have spent the last few years also working with a group of amazing folks, just working focused on giving back to the industry, sharing knowledge. So Shawn, super excited to have you on today as well, sir.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, there we go. Now it's great. Now it's great to be here. I'm really excited to be here and to have a chance to talk to some folks about where we see the industry's at, and hopefully how people can create a more sustainable business, and whether they're starting out from scratch or whether they're already in business and looking at the long term and how they can work better for the environment and be more profitable too. So I think that's where I'm at, and hopefully we can talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's nerd out and give these folks some value, huh? Maybe to kick us off, Shawn, give us a little bit of history and background, briefly explaining the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how those came about. And I realized
Sure.
that, yeah, and maybe I'll throw a link in the chat about UN SDGs, but go ahead.
Yeah. So anyways, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they range from doing good for the planet to doing good for people. It's a huge set of things people can do. It's worth looking at, and it's not worth spending 3 or 4 hours going through each one with everybody on the line. But from the cannabis point of view, and from the environmental point of view initially, I think what folks need to focus on is what their greenhouse gas overhead is, and mainly that comes from their energy use, and what their water use is, and how they take part in the waste stream. So I think those are the 3 things folks in the cannabis industry really need to sort of hone in on. And over the long term, you can add your diversity, equity, and inclusion into it. There's lots of other things you can do, but from what we're talking about in terms of mistakes and building facilities and creating products, it's really what your greenhouse gas overhead is from your energy use, what your water use is, and what part in the waste stream you or your products take part, create and take part in. So I think that's the short answer to Sustainable Development Goals from the cannabis industry's point of view.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Shawn. And I always like to think of SDGs and other mission oriented high level goals as really helpful, like north stars, or way to keep your compass going when you're thinking about how to run your business, how to do almost anything in life. But yeah, with that said, Alexa, maybe I think Shawn kind of teed us up really well in that regard with my next question of how do you see, like, how do you tie in sustainability goals with real-time manufacturing operations? Like, yeah, give us your perspective on that.
Gosh, that's a really great question because we always talk about sustainability, how it pertains to energy and planning and the development phase. But in order to maintain a sustainable business and have a profitable business, you need to have measurables while you're operating and while you're open. So I think the biggest takeaway from that is there needs to be a cascading set of metrics from the top to the bottom. And as you get to the bottom, there really just needs to it needs to get more granular, right? And there needs to be more detail, and that information needs to be visible to everyone. So in addition to when you're planning, considering energy rebates for any of your equipment you're getting, there's a lot of products that your states and your power companies will incentivize you with. So consider that from the start. And then really ensure that all of your sustainability goals from the beginning are tied into every aspect of the design. So it's not just what is your power bill, it's how does this room affect this room? How do we play off of that? How do we double up space? And really just, I think it's very important to just set realistic safety goals and keep communication up with your team. I spoke to a few people in the industry regarding what the most important data is when you're in operations. What can you get real time in the space? And really for each application, whether it's a pre-roll room, extraction, or any of those applications, you're going to want to know every day your number of units per hour up against your target, your uptime, your downtime, and if there's any defects. So you really should monitor that on a daily basis with your entire group. And then on weekly calls, you really want to talk about your stock levels, if there's anything that's been sitting on the shelf too long. And monthly, it's really focusing on quality and next steps. So one of the most important things to remember is what you measure can change over time. So as you track data, make sure you expand upon that and bring in different measurements.
Yeah, well said. And I think one of the big key components, especially as I reflect back on the first 5 episodes of When Things Go Wrong, there's a major component, and even especially in my world too, with quality and GMPs, having data, knowing the right questions to ask that you can measure against, and then not just collecting that data, but what are you doing with it, tracking it over time and evaluating its changes. And that might mean that you change what you're tracking as well, if I was following you correctly there, Alexa.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be able to kind of flex as needed, because at the end of the day, what's most important is your quality. And you need to be reviewing your failures, your wins, your financial realities, your profits. Sustainability pertains to the planet, to keeping our world safer and better and healthier, but it also pertains to keeping your business profitable and open. And right? I mean, sustaining your business, your practice.
So Shawn, if you've got anything to add to that, I'd love to hear it. And to the point that this is related, I'd like to kind of ask this type of question: like, do customers even care about this? Do customers care about a greenhouse gas profile? Do they care about waste? Do they care about Alexa talking about these run rates? Tie this together for us. Give us your thoughts.
Sure. And I think folks, as far as running the business side, I mean, and Alexa was just talking about units production, what your stock is, and measuring that kind of stuff. And part of what people should be measuring, is the amount of energy that goes into producing those units. That's part of what you're measuring, and it will go right to your bottom line. The question is, are you getting enough units for the amount of energy that's going in? And you backing up from there, it's like, what equipment should I buy? And what's the energy efficiency of that equipment that will enable me to produce those units profitably? If you buy the wrong equipment and you hook it up wrong, or you use it wrong, or whatever, you leave it on too long, you are just basically throwing that energy away. it's going up into the atmosphere as greenhouse gas. But from a business point of view, you're throwing that money away, and if you're not measuring that, you won't know until you're sort of underwater, as what it's costing you to make that, and where it's going. So that you got to have the right equipment. You got to measure what energy is going into that in order to make those products. But the question then is like, well, do customers care? And I think what's happening now over the past, well, probably 10 years, but the past 3 or 4 years, is that people are starting to ask those questions about products they're buying. It hasn't happened as strongly in the cannabis industry yet, but people are asking, what's the greenhouse profile of the Allbirds shoes I bought? Where is that lettuce grown? Scan a QR code at the supermarket to find out what the nutrients are and where it was grown, and what its energy profile is. So people are starting to ask those questions about the products they're buying, and cannabis, it will be one of the next places that starts happening. It's going to be important for people to understand that, so they can talk articulately and convincingly about where their product stands in the environment. So you gotta know what you're using, and you gotta measure it, and you gotta be able to then talk about it. And the last thing is probably people who put money in your company, your investors. If you're a public company, you're staring down at some SEC regulations requiring you to do that. Hasn't happened today, but the discussion's out there, and it's going to happen. Your private investors are going to be right behind the public market, saying, what is your greenhouse profile, in addition to what's your profitability. They're going to go hand in hand. So you just have to start thinking that way, and start measuring.
That something that continues to just kind of like befuddle me every day is the fact, this is a plant, right? Plant medicine, and it comes with this very sustainable, green, warm feeling. And then when you realize that, a lot of our cannabis is being grown indoors, and it's super inefficient, and it takes a ton of resources. And I think there's a disconnect that is starting to change slowly and surely over time as folks get more sophisticated, and maybe that's complicated marketplace consumer dynamics, with like conscious consumerism. But it just seems to me like it's a ripe opportunity for more cannabis operators to show up and market that, and use everything you just talked about to their advantage to say, look, we are actually measuring and showing how we are more efficient and sustainable than the company next door, and how does that change branding, right? Go ahead. Yeah.
For one sort of coarse example of that is a researcher at Colorado State, Haley Mills, did a big analysis of energy in cannabis indoor space, and her final decision was, or one of her final findings was, that a 1 gram pre-roll has about the same energy impact as a hamburger and French fries at a restaurant. So single serving to single serving, it's not a good thing to be the same as a hamburger, but it's a single serving of a consumer product. But since people don't measure and don't have those numbers off the tops of their heads, and in their product analysis, you can't talk about it, as you said, but you have to be measuring what you're doing in order to have that conversation.
Wow, that's actually really kind of eye-opening fun fact there about you buy your pre-roll, and then what's that, Alexa?
No, I'm thinking that through. I'm like thinking about the fryers and the gas and the energy use and how that equals that.
Right. And that's a 1 gram pre-roll. I mean, I haven't done the math on a 5 milligram edible, but it's less.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So yeah, Alex, I don't know if you have anything to add to that before I go into kind of some a new, where do you begin with a facility question?
No, I think I'd be happy to kind of move on to that. I'm just kind of trying to wrap my mind around the burger and the fry, and how we can reduce that footprint on
Right.
the pre-roll side.
Right. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and the point, yeah, to tie that back into like facility design is the importance of, again, the data and your outputs. And so when you start at planning, you start at the beginning, you want to think through all this. I mean, even, let's tie it to the bottom line where I think it resonates more tangibly and a lot more easily when you can see the dollars coming in and out, whether it's your electric or utility bill, whether it's your labor cost, these things that we can really easily, almost anybody can grasp, I would say, even if you're not in as an operator. And buying the right equipment ahead of time, understanding its throughput and where that fits, how many people it takes to operate it. There's just so much to unpack there, but it starts with design, with planning, right? So walk me through, Alexa. Step one, I'm here, I've got some investors, I've got a few $1 million. There's this, I don't know, the state of Alabama that has a license application process going now, and I want to grow, I want to design a facility. So I call you, put me through the ringer. Where do we begin?
Well, first, I'd probably ask a lot of questions about the license, if they have a compliance officer, if they're funded, if they're at the budgetary stage, kind of just the initial questions to find out which direction we would steer them. Because as we know, there's no federal standards and there's no guidebook yet that says when you're doing this, these are the best practices. And so I think our first step is kind of finding out where they're at, what their knowledge is, kind of real time, understanding what's important to them. Is it just money? Is it sustainability? How can we combine them both if sustainability is not there? And how do we ensure that their goals are adopted throughout the entire process? So I think the first thing that people really need to realize is that although cannabis is a design and build industry, it's very different than just a food industry or even data management. It's a very different, unique industry because there aren't standards. So I think it's critical to get your planning team from the cannabis industry, ensure that they have experience, and that would be an architect, a qualified MEP, mechanical engineer, who understands all of the various ways you can design both HVAC and the ambient temperatures throughout the room for processing. Getting a GC that fully understands that this is medical grade equipment and that there are SOPs and it needs to be installed in certain manners and needs to be commissioned. If people can afford this in the beginning, I believe it's critical to have somebody in compliance advising on what your state's going to require. Necessary consultants or equipment specialists, and that's kind of where it gets tricky because you need to make sure you're working with someone who's agnostic, who can kind of recommend what's best for you. But really kind of assemble that dream team. And the ultimate goal of doing that and assembling all of these pieces is being able to design for what you're actually going to do. And kind of to add on what Shawn said, review all of the energy consumption through this. Review not only what are the power requirements for this piece of equipment, but what do all the ancillary equipment pull? When you're running a system, what's going to be the power draw? And like you said, David, nobody has all of this. Nobody has the data. So we spent the last year actually compiling a lot of this data so we can just at least give a general idea to our clients who are in these limited power areas. This is your power draw for this room. This is how you can double utilize it. So I think surrounding yourself with people who know cannabis and who are ethical is one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm. And that's, for folks that have been here at previous webinars or, watching it later again, going through our whole playlist for the season, there's a common theme here, and it's not by coincidence, right? Planning, asking the right questions, building the right team. And we've seen that on a CapEx versus OpEx side. Like, yes, it's going to cost you a little bit more up front, but for the rest of your journey, if that facility is expected to operate for 5, 10, 25 years, you have to live with the decisions that you've made up front, right? The retro commissioning is even more expensive. And then let's talk about sustainability and resources and waste there. If you're not doing all this up front, you're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in trouble. And, as more states move towards we've seen it unfortunately so many times, but as more states are moving towards GMP compliancy, that's huge for us. So, we're really working to make sure that the vendors have that electrical listing, that they're certified, that they will be approved and won't delay the build. We're working to ensure there's SOPs for maintenance and service plans. So I think all of this will just bring more legitimacy to the space and bring that hamburger and cheeseburger value down quite a bit.
Yeah, I love it. And, that kind of brings me to, diving into this whole planning and, this is due diligence, right? This is asking the right questions up front. It's having folks to help you identify what questions to ask. I'd say asking the question is almost more important than you obviously the answer matters, but if you don't ask the right question, you're going to get what you ask for, right? And so I think that's really important. Then thinking about that from a supplier standpoint. So the equipment vendors and the folks that you are going to spend a lot of money on procuring. Shawn, I think of that in a GMP world as supplier qualification and doing appropriate due diligence. So from your lens, when you're planning a facility and you want it to be, let's just say, sustainable as possible, which again is profitable, is bottom line as well, just as much as it is, greenhouse gas emissions reduction, that all ties together. What information do you need to ask of your suppliers?
One of the things you should ask, it's called scope 3 emissions. And it's everything that you bring in from the building of it through the operations phases, so it's and what the overhead is for all those things. And right now no one's going to twist your arm into reporting that information, but it goes to the efficiency of the people and the products you're bringing in. So if you're you could be bringing in products, you could be doing a great job in your own business, but bringing in some product that is made inefficiently and uses way too much energy to make, and if you don't ask that question, it's like, start asking, what is the overhead of the product I'm buying? Whether it's an oven, or whether it's cocoa peat, or whether it's, it could be anything. You got to start adding those questions as people are planning. And once you hit the operation phase, you don't stop asking those questions. You have to keep asking, what is it I'm buying? What am I doing with it? And what is the end effect of that? And often that's much bigger, a bigger impact on the environment than the energy you're using to make a product itself, or to grow the cannabis, or to commute for your people getting to and from work. Those are the sort of 3 areas. I think you have to ask, continue asking the questions. I think that's where the sustainability side comes in. Alexa's got a great handle on, what the energy scope is for the equipment you're buying, and then once you got that stuff, you pick the right stuff, and then you got to start asking same type of questions from the people who are selling you stuff on an ongoing basis to keep your ops producing effectively.
When I know that just reminds me of some of the work I was doing pre-pandemic, so it seems like forever ago, but 2018, 2019 in Canada, where folks would set up operations, and I'd fly into the Toronto airport and I'd drive, I don't even know, 4 hours north out into nowhere's land, and trying to get equipment up there, trying to get equipment serviced, trying to find talent that can service the equipment on site. Major logistical challenges in cost, inefficiency, emissions. a disaster. And then of course, add in the reality of today of we still have continued supply chain challenges. So all of these items really add up. And if you're not really asking about all these questions up front, and I'd encourage folks that are tuning in or watching, like you've got a checklist already begun here between Alexa and Shawn today. Just follow along and start asking, build your build your checklist repertoire and start using that, even if you're already operational, right? If you're going to buy new equipment, you're going to hire new people, you might do an expansion. These are important questions to ask. Alexa, yeah, jump in. I mean, tell us more about, from your lens of, what does it take to operate a profitable, sustainable manufacturing facility? And feel free to add anything to what Shawn said so far.
Yeah, no, sure. I love what Shawn's saying. It's so important to think about where it comes from, right? And I always go to think about the factories that they're made in. Have those factories been reviewed? How much waste are they putting into the environment, right? And so we bring them over here, we market them a certain way, they pass all of the approvals, but at the end of the day, sourcing that sustainable product, you create more waste in that process. So I love that reminder, and I think it's important to always remember that. I mean, obviously, the most important that we've talked about is the pre-planning, just spelling out your goals, your timeline, getting your key performance indicators, your measurables. Having a consistent director of operations, someone who's in the beginning or engineering, where they have consistent design goals and that they're being enforced with targeted SOPs. You really want to try to have somebody, in the beginning, it's hard because so many people don't have the resources, right? Or the money or the staff. And so we, at Omega, we try to work with everybody. We try to kind of flex and bring in partners who can help them. But if you can get somebody early on who understands SOPs, understands the importance of creating those early on to tie in with your sustainability goals and your profit goals, somebody who can make decisions early on, not just the money person, but somebody who can say, okay, yes, we need this. This is where we're going. This is an over purchase. Just somebody who can kind of work hand in hand, knowing the vision of their employer. That's huge. And I think it's really important to know your limits and design around them and be realistic. Don't design a facility that needs 3 people operating each piece of machinery in a labor restricted market with 20 feet of snow where nobody's going to be able to go to work. So how can we be realistic and anticipate that and incorporate automation or plan for the future? So I think that's how you operate. That's how you build it. That's how you operate it. And focus on your most profitable vertical. What I like to say to people, the new people, is let's start backwards. What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. What's your goal? And let's go backwards from there and just have a frank discussion, because a lot of people think it's they sell what they think is fun, but that might not be sustainable or profitable.
Oh man, my head continues to run with a bazillion thoughts every time we get the nerd out and share this knowledge. So, just a couple things. One, I know your boss, Alexa, Eric Myers, also works with, dedicates a lot of time with us, with Shawn and I, at the facility design committee at NCIA. And, there are resources available, right? I think that's another key takeaway. You can go to the NCIA blogs and there's 14 committees from cannabis manufacturing committee, the cultivation committee, our facility design committee, science advisory committee, that have put out so much content and so many guides of here's what you need to look for. Here's the questions you need to ask. Here's where, sustainable lighting, here's where these standards exist. What is UL? What does UL marks mean? Why should I ask about that? There's a treasure trove of information that's available. And, then your more recent comment about, having folks start from the end and work backwards. We did some really, it was really enjoyable times where we brought on social equity applicants through the DE&I program at NCIA. And yeah, folks would be starting with, yeah, we got stuck in permitting, we're stuck here. And it's like, well, what's your issue? And we kind of start talking through some of the questions and realize just through, kind of probing them that, well, they want to do everything, but they don't have a plan for any one single product. Yeah, I want to make pre-rolls, want to do some edibles, and yeah, vape pens, like everybody wants a vape pen, right? So, well, hold on, how much money do you have? Oh, okay, how big's your facility? Okay, have you done a market analysis? What do you really like to do? What if there's one product that you could make and you could only do one and you'd be so proud of it and put your name all over it, what would it be? Then they give you an answer, like, yeah, pre-rolls, just brings me back to the day, blah, blah, blah. And, like, all right, let's run down this. And then you start asking all the questions about what it takes to design to design and, mass produce pre-rolls. And you're like, oh, that's a lot. Well, yep. Now I've filled up my entire facility, but you've done it efficiently versus I've got all this hodgepodge of equipment that doesn't even work. People are running into each other. Talked about, levels of inventory. Tracking all of that, it's a lot of work.
Oh, it's so much work. It's, and when we started this years ago, it was figuring it out as we go and really reacting and kind of starting with a list of 100 and whittling it down to about 4, because you want to have partners who share your vision. Details are important. It doesn't have to be this fancy Cadillac, but it needs to be designed with integrity and safety and sustainability.
Yep, well said. And just to pull out a few comments in the chat, and if you guys have questions as we're going, I forgot to make my mention at the beginning that ask any questions throughout. Feel free. We will save some time in the end for Q&A as well. But a couple of important points. One, Jason mentioned that regulators are looking for more detailed operational SOPs, not just the minimum to get the license. And that for me is super refreshing to hear, because don't just tell me this, generic, here, I'm gonna have a quality assurance plan, or I'm going to extract with this, highest grade chemicals. Like, what the heck does that mean? Give me your chemical SKUs, give me the chemical abstract numbers, give me the grade of, the purity grade. We need those details. Those are critical details from a sustainability and efficiency and a safety standpoint. And then just a couple of other comments here about many vendors will have general formulary SOPs. However, many are very unique and custom. I think those are really good points to keep in mind. And then, thank you, Ed, for adding. SOPs need to document what you really do and do with consistency. I love the word consistency. And you can define consistency, right? It doesn't mean 38.4 seconds or 15 minutes exactly, but you have to have some range. Ranges are your friends. So you've got to establish those criteria and those ranges, and you can have, thinking about KPIs and energy efficiency that we've been talking about here. You can have a base level KPI goal, and then you can have your reach goals. You don't have to have one. So have those stretch goals as well, and just think through that at the outset, right? Right, before I keep rambling, let's keep us going with you guys. Shawn, if I'm a producer, or if I'm a retailer, or a distributor, I mean, what does this mean? There was one that answered that they're in the distributing retail side. So how does this impact them? To give some thoughts.
I think, well, they're just like anybody else in any business. Even though you don't have a really high energy use from your lights, like a cultivator would have, or a lot of ovens that you have in a production facility. You've got people traveling, you've got people going to and from work, you've got overhead of your facility, and you're part of the supply chain for a product. And so you need to know what you're doing, and you should be asking questions of the people who are supplying you these products, what their profile is. What did it take to make this? Who made it? And eventually you're going to be told by the SEC that you need to have the sustainability profiles of the suppliers. And because that's the one of the questions is, what did it take to make this? And the distributor is a distributor is a link in the chain to the end user. So you pass that on to a distributor will pass his product through the retailer, and the retailer then has to, with a straight face, tell the consumer what this is. Right now that's not happening, and people don't have to do it. But and when customers start asking, how was this made and who made it? They want to know about the safety, they want to know about the efficacy, and they want to know about, am I supporting a business that is unsustainable and is doing things that aren't good for the planet? And they'll be able to make choices. They'll be able to say, well, do I want to buy product A from a company who's transparent and upfront? Or do I want to buy the same product from the company that's not transparent and upfront? And I have questions about everything that they do. So I think that's, distributor is part of that chain. They should be sort of taking the time now to start thinking about what piece in that chain they hold and how to talk about that. And how to talk about that to their the retailers they distribute it to.
Yeah, well, and I think some important things that you jogged in my mind is, one, supplier qualification also applies at the retail and distribution. You're qualifying the producers of these products that you're putting on your store shelves, and you want to know things like, are they going to be able to consistently provide that product? You want to ensure a good experience for your consumer, which ties into everything, some of the things you talked about there, Shawn, from, sustainability, what does the product represent, what's its quality, what's its efficacy, what's its safety. But if you're not qualifying and ensuring that your producers that are creating these products that you're distributing or selling are profitable and sustainable, they're not going to be there in 2 years. They might not even be there in 6 months. And so how does that affect your inventory and your reputation with the end consumer? So there's just so many ways to kind of slice it up and say, this still matters to you. You still have to ask these really important questions. I don't know, Alexa, I see you nodding your head there. I feel like you probably get some thoughts to add.
I'm just loving hearing what Shawn is saying. I'm actually taking notes and loving that he's saying that we should really kind of help set this, right? And what are the questions to ask? And we're doing that as we speak. And so I'm actually taking notes here because it seems like there's some, terms we can use, like the scope 3 emissions, and kind of asking about these other questions that can really help us qualify that. Because as a distributor, as somebody who does layouts, as somebody who remains agnostic, we want to ensure that the equipment we sell, like you said, can be serviced and has answers for tough problems and transparency. So I like hearing it.
I love it. And of course, yeah, we didn't even talk much about ASTM and standards. And
Yes.
Last week was the ASTM US Pharmacopoeia workshop that I helped organize, where we are setting that bar, right? Like that doesn't exist in our industry, but how does any Fortune 500 company or any other established industry ensure consistency and safety of a global supply chain, regardless of where you buy something? Take your car, take your Ford, Toyota, you name it, Mazda vehicle, and no matter where it's being, whichever factory, the same parts can be measured against the same quality, and the same set of questions exist. There is a foundation there, and we need it for everything we've talked about here. So yeah, it's really exciting to have, especially the two of you here, amongst others that I've had on in previous months, that we're really thinking from that lens, which benefits the industry in the long term as well. It's putting in this work for a long-term investment of a more stable and predictable marketplace. I'm so glad you're such a sponge, Alexa, and just capture more information in real time.
I love it. I'm just listening to him going, oh, this is great. This is so specific.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, building on that, right, Shawn, I don't know if you can add a little bit more about, let me ask you the question, should a facility track its equipment energy use? Let's get specific here with, equipment, or is knowing what the total metered energy produced is enough, right? I've got my meter out in the back of my house, and maybe I have an integrated facility with cultivation and extraction, but I've got 2 different meters. Is that enough? I mean, tell me why you want me to go more granular.
I think It's two reasons. Is you're in any facility you're going to have, you need to set up your baseline. Okay, so that can be at your meter, but then you're going to look at this and say, okay, well, between now and 2030 and now and 2050, I've got to reduce that. I've got to reduce my energy use. And without then being able to say, okay, where is this energy disappearing to? If you start doing sub-panel metering, and the technology exists to do this. It's not exotic. You can do it in your house for a few $100. So and it exists on an industrial scale also. Then if you start looking at where the energy is going, is it in a cultivation facility, it's going into my lights. Oh, and then there's a circuit for your air conditioning. Then there's a circuit. Then inside that there's all these fans, and then there's dehumidifiers, and then there's and on and on and on. And then you can look at what goes into that energy bill, and say, okay, I need to work on my fan energy, or need to work on whatever in order to bring my energy use in line with my goals are for my company in terms of what my energy profile really should be. And you've got lots of time to work on it. You don't have to do it today, but you got you baseline it, you get the data, and then you can continue to collect data and start figuring out how I can be better at what I'm doing. And and you have to remember, every dollar you squeeze out of that system goes to your bottom line. It goes to your bottom line. And in one analysis we did of a fairly large cannabis facility, integrated facility, production and cultivation. We sub-metered everything, and we found there was 30% of the energy in the facility wasn't in cultivation or production. It was going out in other places, and it's a lot of dollars, and there was also, in looking at where the rest of the energy was going, there was probably 50% of the energy in the space could be wrung out of it. So but just the panel doesn't tell you that. And it takes a while to do that. You don't have to do it right away, but starting to know where your energy is going will really help. I mean, in a house, for instance, if you do the sub-metering in a house, you find that basically all your appliances stay on all the time. I mean, your TV, your chargers, everything is on, and they're all a draw. And maybe it should be on, maybe it shouldn't, but it makes up a real percentage of the energy use in a house, and it's even more so in a facility, especially ones with heavy equipment and production equipment. Ovens and extractors are just as energy hungry as the equipment in a cultivation facility.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, they're just not the big boogeyman.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you, I was queuing up a question for, I was like, I know we didn't talk about this during our planning call, but we've talked about it over the last year and a half. Yeah. The Sustainable Cannabis Coalition did a pretty unique partnership with Dartmouth College, correct? That really, that engineered the study findings that you just talked about. And so I think that's a really, I mean, had that been done before in the cannabis space? Tell me about the nexus of that.
No, I'll be short about it, but no, it's never been done before. It was a university study that was actually the researchers went in and did cannabis touching research. So it wasn't a meta study of someone else's data. And it took a lot of nerve on the part of the university to do that, because they risk losing federal funding for other things. But they felt it was worth the risk because of the amount of energy use in the cannabis space, particularly on the cultivation side. and I think that, it was supported by the industry. And I think what our industry really needs to do is support some other universities or Dartmouth and to fund this research. We are putting them at risk. That we should own up and start funding the research to get the data we need as an industry. Because until cannabis is federally legal, the states and the federal government are not going to be funding university research into cultivation or into product production or into any of the things that this industry needs to know that is generally provided by universities in other industries. So I think we're trying to gather up folks to start investing in research and spending the time to get the information we need, from third parties.
It's really encouraging to hear that. I was super stoked when I remember talking to you guys, I guess 2 years ago now, and you're like, yeah, we've got these universities really interested, and it's amazing to be able to harness smart engineers and research institutions that can help start collecting this data, because as you mentioned, it doesn't exist for our industry. And several years ago we were running a lot more we were running more blind than we are today. We still have a long ways to go, but it's really encouraging to see this type of collaborative efforts happening. And I think that goes back to everything you've been doing, Alexa, over the last couple of years. I mean, none of us started in the cannabis industry. You guys have both had illustrious careers outside of that, but to come here and support all of us together from our different unique perspectives and gather data and use that to share knowledge and make our industry better is so powerful. So I think maybe as we look to wrap up our last 5 or 7 minutes here, Alexa, I've got one more question for you, and then just a reminder to everybody if you've got any questions you want to ask here while we're together, please throw them in the chat. But to kind of wrap it up, Alexa, from your side, how can an operator use both existing data and ongoing data, whether it's existing data from peer-reviewed literature that Shawn's talked about, whether it's data that they're tracking or data that we're able to help aggregate, to create a sustainable design, like tie that together into the beginning of design again for us?
Sure, absolutely. Shawn was talking about power and unplugging them, and my immediate thought was that should be integrated into SOPs, kind of like side work at the end of a restaurant shift. Every night, equipment that should be unplugged. My in-laws are from Oregon. Every appliance is unplugged when not in use. So that's not new for us. But pertaining to cannabis facilities, I think it's so important to design where you want to be in 5 years and not where you are in this moment. So utilizing market research data, sustainability studies, viability studies, networking, that's going to help you make the right choice on where you're going to be, and it's going to save you costs long term. So in 4 years, when you go into chocolates, you already had that pre-designed. You already know you have enough power. You have all your power stubs already behind the wall, and you don't have to cut concrete. So I think that's huge in not only maintaining the integrity of this sustainability, but also maintaining the integrity of profits and operations. I think it's critical to review any local codes or state codes and that allow dual use rooms, and explain designs with automation that allow you to utilize it for 2 applications during different shifts. I think it's so important to know your restrictions that we talked about, and to really just properly plan all aspects of your operation so you can have those daily touch points, those hourly touch points, the weekly meetings with every manager for 10 minutes to touch base, the monthly goals, so you can continue to grow and incorporate sustainability into your SOPs, incorporate reduction of buying equipment you don't need and getting what's going to make the most sense for then, and how you can scale for the future. So I think all of that's just critical.
Well said. Yeah, and I see the question that maybe inspired some of what you just said there. I mean, how many SOPs do you think include power shutdown steps? Should they?
I didn't see that. I didn't see that. Great minds, Ed. You're absolutely right. I wonder, I've never seen it.
I can recall couple in the analytical lab days is going back about 10 years now, like one or two, but yeah, that's definitely an overlooked basic concept, right? I mean, why would you not have that in there?
It's eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, so much great information here. And let's kind of wrap up with final thoughts and maybe a call to action. So Shawn, like, how would you summarize our last hour's conversation? Give us your takeaway thoughts.
I think it's a great conversation. I'm really happy to be here. And I think, that, it's what we're talking about applies to existing facilities and people in the planning phase. It's, that, knowing who your suppliers are as you're planning and buying what you're buying, you need to apply that same mindset to your operations. You bring a lot of stuff into a facility, whether it's stuff for growing plants or whether it's stuff to make products. And keep asking those questions. Don't stop asking questions once you're operational. And then collect the data about what you're doing today, so that you can become more energy efficient, and that goes to your bottom line. It's a good thing for the planet, but every buck you save on energy use or travel or whatever, goes to your bottom line, and in the end, it will make you more profitable. So it's all tied together.
Yep, you can't escape it. It's all tied together, right?
And you got to measure it before you can do anything.
Mm-hmm. We live in an integrated ecosystem. There's no true closed loop, closed system. There are impacts every step of the way, thinking it through. Alexa, give us your final takeaway thoughts here.
Gosh, I mean, there's so many, and how do I keep it
Right.
under 20 seconds? Really, I mean, sustainability is the ability to maintain at a certain rate. So just like when we design, we think, how can we sustain this? How can we maintain profit? And how can we scale, right? So I think as people enter the space, as people consider coming into this space, it's incredibly important to define what's important to you and how that will be applied early on. I like to say it's math. It's science and math. While it's emotional, we own it. It's part of our business. We're passionate about it. It is science and math. And that's how I hope we proceed as we move forward.
Well said. Yeah. There's analytics behind all this, things, especially working with legacy growers and seeing folks come into, bigger operations where like, well, I've always done something this way. It's like, can we measure that? Can we quantify that? There's got to be a way. And you just have to take the time to think through it, look at your resources, do the research, right? Evaluate the data that's out there, case studies, et cetera, and then apply that and start putting those metrics out there. Yeah, well said. I mean, thank you, the two of you. I appreciate every time we get to hang out together. Most of the time it's virtually, but both of us have gotten to hang out in person. I think I'll see both of you in January as well for ASTM Committee Week. I know Shawn, as the chair of the Sustainability Subcommittee at D37, will be there. And for folks that enjoy, I wish everybody happy holidays as we go into the end of December and the shortest days of the year. While we work to build out our program for January and February and essentially 2023, Emmy's throwing the link in there for our next webinar, which will be same time, same place, third Wednesday of the month, so January 18th. Go ahead and just register now, put it on your calendar. But I really appreciate everybody that showed up today. I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. And with that, this is a wrap. Go enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, David.
Bye. Good night, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Shawn.